Hello, how are you today?
I'm doing fine, Maria.
Thank you so much for making the time to do this interview. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for asking me to do it. It's a pleasure.
So I want to thank you and acknowledge that you were a champion for getting ranked choice voting implemented in Santa Fe from the get-go. You and Councilor
Sure.
Villarreal were fighting with me from the beginning. And I want to ask you why you decided to get behind this as you did with such enthusiasm.
Well, when I was newly elected as a city councilor, I studied the charter and I saw the charter amendment, and I felt like ranked choice voting should become a reality, and I felt like something like election machine technology should not be an issue that would get in the way of implementing ranked choice voting. And so I really felt it was a clear public mandate to the point where it was on our city charter, and I felt like we had enough advancements in election machine technology that we could make ranked choice voting happen.
Once you were campaigning for your run for mayor, this campaign, once ranked choice voting was implemented, how did your campaign strategies shift to accommodate this new method?
Well, I think as a candidate running for mayor with ranked choice voting, I think basically everyone's in play in one way or another. It's not like the traditional mentality on the part of a voter where they just pick one and that's it. In this case, everyone's viable, maybe not as the number one, but as the number 2, 3, and so on. And so it changes the whole dynamic of an election, and you don't want to alienate any part of the electorate. And so I think it made for a much more professional, tactful election. It focused candidates on the issues. I think it just had an all-around positive impact on the campaign, on the mentality on the part of voters and candidates. And I think you saw this campaign was a very clean campaign. There was no mudslinging. We did have over 20 forums, and attendance was fabulous. Even towards the very end of the campaign, we had packed houses. And so I think I attribute that, at least in part, to ranked choice voting.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the need for candidates to appeal to a broad base and ask for those second and third choice votes. Can you share with us perhaps an anecdote or a story about when you were talking to a voter yourself and they said their first choice was somebody else, and how those conversations went in terms of you asking for a second or third choice vote?
Well, yeah, I'll give an example. One anecdote is that maybe if it were a typical campaign without ranked choice voting, if I came upon a registered voter while knocking on doors and they had a sign of an opponent, I may not go and engage with them. Mm-hmm. But in this election, I didn't avoid any voter, no matter their affiliation or their choice, their top choice anyway. And so I think it just encouraged the candidates to engage as many voters as possible, even voters they knew would not maybe make them their top choice.
And did you, when you encountered these voters that perhaps said, well, I'm going to give my first choice to somebody else, and you were asking for their second choice, how were those conversations like? What was it like for you? What was it like for a voter to have that dialogue about perhaps a second choice vote?
Well, they'd engage too, because some of them didn't even know that we had ranked choice voting. So they thought, well, wow, so I can actually rank the voters, and many of them, or the candidates, many of them didn't even think about ranking any other voters, any other candidates other than their number one choice. And so they started, finding out more about who I was as a candidate. And so I think there was a lot of interest in the other candidates, not just their top choice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When you were having these conversations with voters that were perhaps supporting somebody else, and you were learning about what their priorities were, how did that inform your campaign or your stance on the issues? knowing that perhaps these people weren't going to vote for you, number one, but number two or number three, did that change the way that you were talking about the issues or that you were thinking about the issues?
Well, as a candidate, I mean, with or without ranked choice voting, when you engage a voter, you kind of have a trial question to see where their leanings are. And so I think that is a constant in any campaign, with or without ranked choice voting. With ranked choice voting, obviously, it was a way to maybe characterize, I don't want to use the word profile, but I would characterize the voter, and I would promote certain issues that I thought that voter would identify with. And so it didn't really change how I engage with voters, but when they mention a candidate that they favor, and being familiar with that candidate and their positions, I mean, I want to strike some minor nuances that may align best with that higher choice candidate.
And this is the last question. How do you think, I mean, we had about 2 months to educate the voters. This was kind of like a fast-paced timeline. But, come election day, we had a higher than expected voter turnout. People ranked, most people ranked all of the candidates. How do you think ranked choice voting affected this community, not just on election night, but sort of in general as the process of it? How do you think that has changed Santa Fe or affected Santa Fe?
Well, Santa Fe, in my opinion, I think is just it's a hotbed, it's a bellwether city for democracy, and we should be that beacon on the hill when it comes to democracy. And I think ranked choice voting, secured Santa Fe's legacy, as that beacon on the hill for democracy in general. And in the case of ranked choice voting, when it was legally required, I think a lot of folks were skeptical. They really felt like there wasn't enough time to properly educate voters. But organizations like FairVote, I think, really helped augment city resources to really help to educate voters and prepare them. And that, coupled with, I think, just the robust nature of all the forums and questionnaires, I think really helped. It really did help the whole process. I think Santa Fe is a better community for it. It's much more democratic. I think a lot of them got to know all the candidates much, much more. And I think it empowers the voter, and which I think this is what we want, right? In the broadest sense for our democracy is, the proudest, civic, duty that we have is to vote and to give people, the widest number of options to participate in that process. I think is good. It's great. And it's great for Santa Fe.
What was your experience like as a voter that day? You live in a district that had a city council race with ranked choice voting, right? How was your experience voting?
You know what? I really had to think. I really had to think about all my rankings, but I think I was different as a voter and a candidate. I mean, I intimately knew the positions of my opponents, and so, but I still took it seriously. I think a lot of voters really felt an obligation and responsibility to see it all the way through and properly rank them. We all have a conscience, right? And I think that that rang true in the final outcome of the election, with so many people ranking all the candidates. And so it was just good all around. I think we're a better community for it. And, well, at the rate we're going, we're going to be a better state for it if we see ranked choice voting approved in other communities.
Well, I hope so. I hope you're right. Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you.